Hello, my name is Ed. This is another tag team opinion spot. Phil's had his up a couple days ago. This is my half of the video. Basically, we're talking about Quentin Tarantino and also who you guys out there might think of as your, favorite movie directors. Okay, so, basically, just starting off, I'm a pretty big fan of Quentin Tarantino. I'm not an uber fan, but I think he's talented and skilled, and I like most of the stuff that he's done. And I'm pretty sure I've seen a good portion of the things that he either wrote and directed or had some involvement in. I've seen his first movie, Reservoir Dogs. I've seen True Romance, even though he didn't direct it. That movie was directed by Tony Scott, but he did write the screenplay, and that to me feels like a Quentin Tarantino movie. I've seen Pulp Fiction. Let's see here. There's a movie called From Dusk Till Dawn, which again he did not direct. I think it was directed by Robert Rodriguez, but I do know he wrote the story for it, and he co-starred in it along with George Clooney. There's Jackie Brown. Then there's Natural Born Killers. Natural Born Killers, of course, was directed by Oliver Stone, but it was based loosely on a story by Quentin Tarantino. That's actually more of a Oliver Stone movie, but maybe we could talk about that a little bit later. There's the Grindhouse flick that he did once again with Robert Rodriguez. I remember seeing that in the theater. And then there's Kill Bills Part 1 and Part 2, and then there is Inglourious Bastards. And I believe there was an anthology movie called Four Rooms, which had like four different stories. It was set in a hotel, and it had like four different stories by four different movie directors, and Quentin directed one of the segments. I did not see that, but like I said, I've seen a good number of Quentin Tarantino's movie work and things like that. And like I said, I like him. I think he's talented. I think he's skilled. I know he's been a pretty controversial film director for a moment. I know there are people who have problems with his use of violence. I know a few years ago, in a couple movies, people criticized him about, his use of the N-word. He's a little bit less. I think some of that sort of controversies died down. I know some people think that, just while some people think he's the greatest and really love everything he's done and everything like that, there are other people who think he's a little bit overrated. They think, oh yeah, he's just taking these bits and pieces from these other movies and just mixing them up, He's not really saying anything super original. I think that's true to an extent. Well, just let's go back to an earlier controversy as far as like Reservoir Dogs has come out. And you remember a lot of people comparing it to like, there's an old Stanley Kubrick movie called The Killing. Yeah, The Killing, which I did not see. But I know a lot of like mainstream movie critics, compared it to that, and some other people brought in the whole idea of there seems to be a little bit of influence of old, Hong Kong gangster movies and things like that. And I didn't know this till fairly recently, but it seems like Quentin has liberally borrow pieces from a movie called City on Fire, which was directed by Ringo Lam, I think. I have not seen that movie. I've seen a couple other Ringo Lam movies, but I have not seen that particular movie. And I think Chow Yun-fat's in that movie. Somebody please help me out if I'm, getting anything wrong. Please let me know. But I mean, that's just one thing. People think, oh, he's just ripping off these other sources or whatever. I think what he does, and I think what he's able to do, fairly well, is to like kind of liberally borrow from, B-movie sources, more obscure cases, more critically acclaimed movies and things like that, and blend them in such a way to make them feel fresh. And I think his best work, he's able to make it more than just that, more than just another tribute to B movies or 70s movies. He's able to bring a certain sort of emotional weight to some of those movies. And the movies of his that are kind of lesser, maybe they don't have that same sort of weight or heaviness or deepness to them, but they're still fun and interesting and clever enough to just make them, interesting just going along on the ride. I think that's, something to be appreciated, especially with so many different types of genre movies and Hollywood movies and things like that that are supposed to be, just fun, popcorn movies, and you get let down because they don't have anything original to bring to it. At least he's able to bring a certain amount of zip and style and just a touch of panache or whatever. Let's see here. I think I brought up oh brother. I wanted to talk about True Romance. Like I said, that movie is directed by, Tony Scott, big name Hollywood director. But everything you remember about that movie are very Quentin Tarantino-esque touches. You've got the thriller plot, you've got the characterization, you've got the memorable dialogue scene, you've got certain colorful, supporting characters that are just a little bit offbeat or whatever. And that's what you remember. You remember those touches that you can see in some of Quentin Tarantino's other movies. You remember that a little bit more than, Tony Scott's, directorial style. That's there as well, but the story is what you really remember about that. The story and the way the characters play off each other and so on and so forth. Let's see, another interesting thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is a movie called From Dusk Till Dawn, which was this movie that co-starred George Clooney, and it kind of started out like it looked like it was going to be like this road trip thriller crime flick, but literally like about halfway into it, it turns into this kind of offbeat B-movie vampire flick, It's really kind of crazy. I don't know how many people, well, I don't know. I liked it. I was entertained by it. I didn't think it was particularly deep or anything like that, but I thought it was, just a fun offbeat romp. I know there was a couple of sequels that were like direct to DVD that were kind of, I think I saw the first sequel, which was called Texas Blood Money, and then they made another Dusk Till Dawn. I didn't see that one. But I thought it was fun enough, From my understanding, what had happened was, I guess, and I can't remember the name of the guy, but the guy who helped out on like the makeup and the effects for Reservoir Dogs had this idea, and he was like, yeah, Quentin, and I guess kind of as a favor to each other, he's like, yeah, okay, I'll work on your little low-budget movie if you, work on this story I have, work on this script for this idea I have for a movie. So Quentin kind of wrote the script, from this dude's story idea, as a favor to him, and that's how that movie came about. And I don't know exactly how Robert Rodriguez got involved, but that's how that movie came about, and I thought that was pretty interesting. What else? Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown is probably one of my favorite Quentin Tarantino movies. I don't know. It's up there, you know what I mean? I don't really like ranking movies and things like that, but that's a movie that I know that a lot of like Tarantino fans are kind of like meh on. I kind of get the feeling that it was probably because that movie seems a little less Tarantino-esque, it has fewer of his, tropes and conventions that he has in each movie, but, over time, that's grown on me. I really like the story. I really like, once again, the way the characters interact and everything like that. But then again, it seems a little bit different and a little bit, I don't know. I hesitate to say this word, but maybe a little bit more mature. But then again, it's because it's based on a novel by Elmore Leonard. And tell you the truth, I would almost want to see him do that again. Maybe work on another movie by with a script from another writer, or adapt another crime novel or whatever. You know what I mean? But Jackie Brown's a movie I really like a lot. And probably my favorite, if that's not my favorite movie, then my favorite movie is the Kill Bill films. Now, I know that it's definitely probably one of my favorite just balls to the walls action flicks, From what I understand, I guess it was supposed to be this one big sprawling movie, but Harvey Weinstein, convinced Quentin to like kind of chop it up into like chop it up into two films, But what I would recommend to anybody who has not seen it yet, go rent it and rent both movies at the same time and watch them both at the same time, just clear out a little, period of time, just settle in and just watch the first one, then watch the second one, back to back. And that's a really great, film going experience. And I'm sure that's how it was meant to be. You know what I mean? The first half has most of the action and the second half has most of the emotional, stuff and more of the characterization going on. But put together, that is a cool, cinematic film watching experience, and of course, for people who don't know, I remember him saying it's a tribute to, all the Grindhouse movies he used to watch back in the late 70s or whatever, but it's that and some other things thrown in there as well. You get his tribute to the Shaw Brothers, you get his tribute to gangster movies, to Yakuza movies, his tribute to old westerns, his tribute to anime, all that sort of thing. But it works, it's all over the top and crazy and things like that, but you do get the excellent dialogue, you get scenes that you think you know how they're going to go, but they end up going some other way. And like I said, you do get an emotional payoff at the end of the movie. So I think that flick is really great. Talking about Grindhouse, Quentin Tarantino's half, if I had to pick, actually I like the whole thing, together. But the thing is, Robert Rodriguez half, Planet Terror, that movie felt like a parody, like he's making a joke of those old, cheesy B movies, while Quentin's part actually felt like a real movie, if that makes any sense. When you had the action scenes in the Robert Rodriguez film, those kind of felt like ha, okay, I get it, yeah, zombie movies, ha, and you kind of laughed along with that movie. Whereas with Quentin Tarantino's movie, even though there was humor and things like that, when it came to the action stuff, you took those scenes seriously, I mean, there was a visceral scene to, like, the car chase scenes and, an early, for lack of a better term, well, I don't want to give it away, but there's a death scene that happens and you feel that impact or whatever. I think, his dialogue and things like that weren't quite up to the level that we had seen in his past movies or whatever, but I thought it's a solid movie. While Robert Rodriguez movies parodied drive-in movies, Quentin's movie was a drive-in movie, you know what I mean? As far as Inglourious Basterds is concerned, I liked it. I saw it at the theaters. I thought it was pretty good. I remember reading, oh, jeepers, it might have been a couple of years now, because I remember reading, before Kill Bill came out, and definitely before Grindhouse came out, reading on some website or something like that, some little blurb or whatever, where Quentin was talking about, yeah, my next movie will be a war epic, but I still need to work on the script, and he said something like, yeah, because if I shoot it the way I've got the outline written now, it's going to be a 6-hour movie, you know what I mean? And of course, I don't want to sit through a 6-hour war movie, but it would have been really interesting to see, how Inglourious Basterds could have turned out if he had made different choices, because really, when you look at it, each segment, it could have been its own movie. The Brad Pitt Commandos, you could have got a whole movie out of that. The lady who ran the movie house, you definitely could have got a whole movie out of that. And same thing for the German soldier guy. Could have got a whole movie out of him. So I'm really interested. I'm kind of curious about all the stuff that he probably cut it out to, trim the movie down and make it a little bit more palatable and things like that. I liked it. I thought there were some really great suspense scenes and things like that. I will admit I kind of got a little taken out of the movie a little bit with the spaghetti western background music, and definitely when David Bowie music showed up. But you know what I mean? Those are my little minor quibbles, you know what I mean? But for the most part, I really enjoyed it. But at this point, I wonder if we're starting to get to the point where Quentin should kind of branch out a little bit. Like I said, his next movie, he says, is going to be a Western. It's going to be the Django movie. And I don't know too much about that whole kind of subgenre of like Westerns. I know they're like these kind of crazy spaghetti Westerns that came out like back in the early 70s and things like that. You know, my experience with, you know, Westerns and things like that go to like, you know, Once Upon a Time in the West, you know, and the Good and Bad and the Ugly movies, you know, those type of things. And I want to say, what was it? They Call Me Trinity, or Trinity is Still My Name. Actually, I think there was a few of those. I vaguely remember seeing one of those movies, like, as a teenager on late night TV or whatever. But anyway, I'm just saying my experience with those type of movies are kind of limited, but you know, now I'm thinking, you know, okay, is he going to make a Western, or is this going to be, here's my tribute to crazy Westerns from the 70s, you know what I mean, here's my homage to those movies, you know what I mean? Is it going to be something where, you know what I'm saying? Is it going to be something that's just going to stand up just as a Western? You know what I mean? I would kind of like to see Quentin kind of branch out a little bit, because it's kind of getting to the point where it's like he's a guy who's a skilled guy, but maybe he's running out of things to say. You know, I would love it if you just come out with a movie and say, okay, here's my crime movie, here's my thriller movie, here's my mob movie, here's my whatever, my relationship movie, or my family drama or whatever, and not have it be a tribute to, you know, all those old movies that we loved from, you know, back in the day or whatever. You know, maybe he could re-team up with Roger Avery or whatever, who he co-wrote Pulp Fiction with, or whatever, or maybe adapt another novel or another, you know, work from someplace else or something like that. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, you know, I don't hate the guy. I'm just saying I would like to see him kind of branch out a little bit. Okay, anyway, that's my take on this subject matter. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think about Quentin Tarantino. Tell us if you think he's great. Tell us if you think he's hack. Tell us if he's not a hack, but tell us if you think he's overrated. You know, whatever. Tell us if you think there's somebody better. Hey, make your own video. Let us know who you think are your favorite movie directors. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot, and you all have a real cool time.